All right. Welcome to this week's live office hours. A lot to talk about, I think, today because we went to AMZ United. I got to speak, which was awesome. And I actually wanted to kind of highlight what I talked about. I'm not going to do the whole presentation, obviously, because I want to make sure we can get to questions, all that good stuff. But I do want to highlight a few things because I really geeked out. Let me get this pulled up here for us. Um, Again, I'm not going to go through everything. And if you have questions about anything, again, this is live office hours. So if you have questions about Aura, repricing, selling, all that's still on the docket here. Just kind of want to kick us off. So let me share my screen. And we'll do the whole one here. Awesome. Okay, cool. All right. So actually, you know what? I'm going to do this differently because I don't like the way it's.
Oh, there we go. Looks like Dylan might have just had a brief crash on his internet. Oh,
we're back.
There we go. Back. Nice.
Yeah. Just press the wrong button there. Okay.
I was ready to vamp for you.
I appreciate it. I don't like what it, like, because sometimes I will switch. So like I'm sharing a window, but I want to pull up our setup so I can make sure it's actually coming through correctly. So wanted to make sure we did that. Okay. So my presentation didn't really talk about repricing all that much. I actually wanted to kind of shift everybody's perspective in the audience in terms of like how you should think. These are things that I've been talking about for a while, but I wanted to make them more tangible in a lot of cases. So I'm gonna skip through a lot of this stuff, but I kind of position first and foremost, like the way we have measured success in repricing is not really the best way to do it. There's a lot of subtle nuances, right? And it's kind of made sense historically because we haven't had access to as much data. We haven't really thought about this super well, in my opinion, right? When we first started Aura, we had such unique perspectives because we've been sellers and we're running the company, but we started to notice things in the data, certain patterns and methodologies and things of that nature that really went against what was kind of just accepted. And so we have this weird conundrum where you have software companies that are doing their thing really well, but they're not really teaching or really looking at the data to say what's really true here, right? We're just taking everything for granted. And so the way we've historically done this is we have either looked at the buy box percentage or sales, right? If those two things go up, success. I would posit that's not necessarily true because as your buy box ownership percentage goes up, your profit margin tends to go down. So there's a law of diminishing returns here, right? When somebody's on Twitter or X and they're, sharing, hey, I'm getting 80% buy box, I tend to say, you're probably missing out on a lot of profit margin. And while it looks nice, it's somewhat a vanity to a certain degree. So we kind of need a different way to kind of think about things, right? And I use this as an entry point into the larger kind of concept here, which is like every seller is dealing with two different things, right? You're struggling with speed and complexity. And this is, if you heard me speak anywhere, I talk about this, right? Speed and complexity. For speed, we handle that with Hyperdrive. For complexity, we handle that with Maven, our AI model. But this is a larger problem, right? We can only solve the problems that we work on, which happens to be pricing for us. However, how you buy inventory, speed and complexity does matter. If you think about why is sourcing so difficult, well, you're trying to do something in a high volume, meaning speed, right? You're trying to do a lot in a short period of time, and you're dealing with a lot of complexity. You're looking at data, analyzing deals, all these different things, and you have to be able to do this really well. But what's frustrating is that humans kind of suck at this, which is like really frustrating. But the opportunity here is data, AI, all these things, software makes this dramatically easier to do. Now, this is what I really wanted to highlight in this call. And again, if you're having questions about anything, this is open office hours. I'm just kicking us off. I know a lot of people just jumped in. Feel free to throw those into chat. We can dive deeper into anything you guys have. In my opinion, we have a problem with software. We talk about this a lot internally as a team. I think I've mentioned this quite a bit publicly. Most of your software companies do not operate like software companies. What happens is you either have one of two things happen. You have a technical person, right? So a computer science major software engineer, come into our space and not understand the subtle nuances of what it's like to be a seller. So they design something that rationally makes sense, but it's not factoring in how sellers actually operate. And so there's a lot of friction that gets created, or the inverse happens. You have a very well-known Amazon seller who wants to get into software because the margins are really fat and they're like, oh, this would be great. And then they hire a bunch of, outsourced staff to build it. They understand the subtle nuances of being a seller, but they don't understand the technical aspects of what they're building. And so they end up building kind of crap software. And this is not like a problem with them as an individual. Obviously, it's just kind of how it works. I'm not a software engineer. If I were to build Aura, it would be garbage. That's just a fact. That's why it's important to have a technical team internally. Most of the software in our space is actually outsourced, which is so interesting, right? You're a software company who doesn't actually build software internally, which is kind of weird. And so what happens is these founders, these business owners are not really putting on what I call their product hat. In software companies, you have something called product. And product could be your software engineers, could be your product designer, project managers, product managers, all kinds of things. The whole concept of the product is making it easy to use, right? Your users, funny enough, are not the ones who should be dictating what you build or how you build it, should I say. They should be dictating, hey, here are my problems that I need help solving. That's the role of the user. The role of the business is to say, okay, that's the problem. Let's really get down to the nitty gritty here, understand what that problem is, and then it's up to us to innovate and find the right way to solve this. That doesn't happen. What happens is a bunch of users say, we want X, and they go, great, here's exactly what you asked for. Not much thought is put into it. And so what ends up happening is you get given basically this ocean of settings, this ocean of features that make the product basically bloated, harder to use. So they're actually passing on the complexity to the end user. And so you're still doing these manual processes. You're just doing it with code now, but it's still manual. Like you didn't actually innovate anything here, which is kind of frustrating. And most of the software right now has existed for 10 plus years. And so while you may not care as the end user, you do because you don't realize the alternative. They're using old tech. And by old tech, what does that mean? I mean, languages, frameworks. These are things these are our components, right? When we say Python or JavaScript, those are languages. Some languages are really old. There are massive companies in our space built on .NET, which is a very, very, very old system. Why should you care? Because one, that system is incredibly hard to scale. It's incredibly hard to make performant as the internet continues to evolve and speed continues to matter. Number two, it's hard as crap to hire amazing software engineers to write that code because they don't want to write that code. They don't want to write old legacy code. They want to write with new tech because that's what's really fun. And so you end up in this weird dichotomy where you have a thing that works, but you can't make it better unless you just completely rebuild it. And we had to do this, right? And we're not even that old. So this creates a huge problem in the Amazon software space. And a lot of times, you don't have a product designer like we do on the team full time. So you're not even having a designer come in and say, here's what it should look like. Here's how it should feel. Here's the UI, what does it visibly look like? Here's the UX, the experience of using it. And so you have this very unintuitive software and you're just like, why is everything so hard to do? It's because it hasn't been made easy by the person in charge of that. What tends to happen is you have a front-end engineer. Front-end engineer is basically just writing the visual code that you're saying, and they're making those decisions. Well, most of your front-end engineers are not designers. It's a very different world. And so you end up with kind of what we have now, which is kind of frustrating. And so I kind of talk about how does this change? Where are we going from here? Because we're really trying to set a better standard for software in our space. And I think things are changing. You kind of have this spectrum, right? Between manual processes. So things you're doing manually, like sourcing is typically manual. All the way at the end of that, you have full AI. And somewhere in the middle is algorithms, right? And algorithms sound so scary. Algorithms just mean a set of steps that are followed consistently. So you probably have a sourcing algorithm. You just don't call it that. That's your strategy. Funny enough, the reason why we call repricing strategies and not algorithms, even though they are, is because it's more friendly. Because the average person hears an algorithm and goes, I don't know what the heck that is. So you get kind of strategy, right? So that's the spectrum I like to kind of think through. And here's where I think we're at today. give or take a little bit of pixels there. We're starting to move into the AI world, but we're not really into that. And who knows how far that goes, right? We're just on the cutting edge of this stuff. But it does matter. And you can see a world where a lot of your agencies, your Amazon-based agencies, completely go away to software, like AI-based software, right? Most resellers, which is who we focus on and who we support, don't do things like listing optimization. Why? Because it's time consuming, not worth it. 2, it costs too much if you have to pay somebody to do it, like an agency or a VA. And 3, you're not going to be on that listing very long in most cases. So why do it? If you're doing wholesale, probably makes sense, right? So there's this whole world that's not being optimized because the incentives are not aligned. But if you had an AI sitting in the background where every time you jumped onto a listing, it passively would find the right keywords, add it to the back end, update the listing, everything, and that just happened automatically. Imagine what that does at scale. Imagine if you just passively optimize 10% of Amazon's listings. What does that do to demand and things of that nature? But then you got inventory, right? I've always said you make money when you buy inventory, not when you sell it. Inventory management matters a great deal, and it's not the sexiest thing in the world, but it does matter. We are getting to a point, and I've already seen examples of this, where you're able to take all your data, give it to an AI and say, hey, help me optimize my spend here. Help me optimize my inventory. What should I move? What should I be more conservative on? Things of that nature. Imagine that just happening. That gets kind of interesting too. Customer support, we already do this. This is already pretty common, but PPC campaigns is another big one. This happens on Google. We use smart campaigns already where AIs, we basically say, here's our target, here's our limitations, go. And there's definitely some management outside of that, but for the most part, we're not doing like manual bids, which is what you used to do. You used to say, I'm going to bid 40 cents for this keyword. Well, 40 cents makes sense now, but in 3 hours, I might need to bid $1.20. We don't have to do that anymore, right? It's completely eliminated. I think this will come, and you kind of see some of this in Amazon PPC, but I think it will come even further, even if it's an AI system sitting on top of Amazon PPC. Definitely going to come. So a lot of things are going to change. These are a few examples. So the thing I try to get across to people at AMZ United is this is not 5 to 10 years down the line. This is not me just pontificating of a future. Like this stuff's here now. The components already exist. So Thoughtly is a really cool company. They just raised a ton of money. They basically handle inbound sales call. I was talking to my stepdad. He runs a entertainment company in the wedding space, and they do a lot of inbound sales. I'm like, what if you didn't have to do that anymore? We just hand it over, and then like a lot of that's done for you. Possible. Relevance actually created an AI BDR. BDR means business development rep. Basically, instead of you having to go manually do this outreach and blah, 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 all these emails, you just feed it the leads. It goes and researches each person, crafts a personalized email, sends it out. And its entire goal is to qualify people, qualify leads. And then if they're good enough, put you on a call with them on your calendar. That's a whole role that, could be eliminated. The bottom two we actually use. So Howie I use for scheduling. I just CC the Howie email address on an email thread somebody wants to meet, and it goes great. It's hooked up to my calendar. It checks everything and goes, cool, Dylan's available tomorrow at 2, 3, and 4. And the person goes, 3 p.m. sounds great. Awesome. I'm not in the loop at all. I just CC Howie, fire it off. And then what ends up on my calendar is the event. Intercom we use internally. Funny enough, they call it Finn, and we have Finn on our team with 2 N's, which is just ironic. But like we automatically handle 70 to 80% of our support load automatically with no human in the loop. And we're well known for our customer support. So think about that, right? A lot of these things are coming. We're already here. And so my prediction, I'm sure many people have heard me say this, is eventually, probably in the next, I want to call 8 to 12 months, I think is pretty realistic. We will be able to build AI sourcing agents. These are agents that don't have internet connection issues, that you don't have to hire and train. When you want to 10x your sourcing efforts, you don't have to go to hire 10 more VAs. You just spin up more instances of this. And you can imagine a world where you have one AI agent focused on every single site that you source from. And also maybe another one that's helping you find additional sites. It just goes and explores things. And all it does is it checks everything 24/7. And when something pops, it sends it your way. It says, hey, take a look at this. What if you just had this AI agent infrastructure that was just feeding you leads 24/7? Because what does a VA do when they're sourcing for you? exactly this. There's nothing human about it. There's nothing physical about it. It is literally looking at information, analyzing it, and making decisions. AI can do that. So a lot of things will, I think, change. And so fast forward here, there's also another problem with data, right? Whenever you're talking AI, algorithms, all these things, what ends up happening is it's only as good as your data, which is funny because when people are like, sell me on repricing, I'm like, well, it's only as good as your inventory. It's the same concept, right? It's a multiplier of things. So the issue is you're actually drowning in data, which is the opportunity. That's actually the upside here, right? Like you have so much data on your account, but you don't have access to all of it. It's sometimes hidden behind APIs. The amount of data I can get on your seller account from the APIs vastly more than what you get just looking at your Seller Central account. So we had the sea of data that's not really being tapped into, which is a problem. And again, we already talked about this, but like you as a human cannot analyze this data fast enough. I think we're going away from making like, let me analyze this quarter and make a big bet. I think we're going to like making a crap ton of small bets, and it's going to make sense because things are changing rapidly, right? That's that whole speed problem. So with that, not having access to all the data, not being able to analyze it fast enough, you have these massive blind spots, essentially what's happening, right? So you're making decisions with, let's just call it 60% of the information available to be conservative. That's still another 40% that's not even being factored in. But what if it was? What would your business account look like then? And every seller is completely different. We talk to all of our users, and every single one, when we talk about what data do you care about and don't care about, it's vastly different from one to the other. It's very easy for us to assume we're all Amazon sellers, therefore we all operate the same way. And that's just factually incorrect. I am an ROI guy. Casey could be a profit margin guy. Neither one of us is right or wrong, but it is different in terms of how we make decisions. And so you have to be able to take in your personalized information. How much capital do you have? What are you trying to build? How big are you trying to get? All these different things. And then being able to say, okay, here's the outcome where I want to get to. What's true now? And then how we close that gap. You notice how I'm using the exact same analogy for Maven, right? Where do we want to go? How are we defining success? What is true now in the data? And then what are we going to do about that to close the gap to get to where we want to? And we bring this back to optimal prices, right? This is where like, I wanted to bring it back and get people to understand, like, here's how we think about things in a larger scale model. And then here's how we're applying that in the world that we exist in, which happens to be repricing. So I mentioned basically like the way you're measuring success with repricing, that whole, like my buy box percentage went up, my total sales went up. Is that good? It depends is the answer, because there's so many nuances. Instead, we want to move to a different world where we say, well, what if we could calculate what the optimal price should be at any given moment and then measure success based on you plus the buy box are at that price as often as possible? What's interesting is in a lot of cases, you end up having a pullback in sales velocity a bit, but you have a huge increase in profit margin. Why is that? Because when you're targeting and maximizing your buy box percentage, how do you do that? You lower your price. There's downward pressure when you have increased competition. And so we said, well, what if we could relieve that pressure? What if we could operate in a completely different way? Turns out it works pretty well. And so we're trying to have this whole different model, in the grand scheme of things, and then boil it back to what can we do today, which is what we worked on with Maven and Hyperdrive. And then what does that look like over the next, 8 to 12 months? And then how do we fit inside of that? So I kind of talk about that to a degree here. Hold on, things acting up. So basically a paradigm shift, how we want to think about things is very different. I mentioned Hyperdrive, Maven. And I think the future for sellers that you guys need to be aware of is you're operating as a software company, as a tech company, not an e-commerce company. Most of your e-commerce companies are operating like a software company. You're looking at data, you're looking at the math of it, and then you're making decisions based off that. So I think what's going to happen, you will have new software come into the space using cutting edge tech like we are. You will have co-pilots. And I love this term. It's such a good term that is actually hooked up to all your data. You can ask questions. Here's the thing. No Amazon seller I've yet to meet is a data analyst by trade. Nobody. But think about that. You have a sea of data, an ocean of data, and you can't analyze it and make good decisions. But you know what you can do? You know how to ask good questions. That's actually the easy part. So you have this gap between these unearthed answers in the data and the questions you have that you can't actually answer. What if you close that gap? What happens then? What happens when you can say, hey, something feels odd about my account, what's happening? And it goes, oh, well, actually, there was a huge decrease in top level search results for your main keywords on your main listings. Great. What changed? Oh, well, somebody actually went in and changed the backend keywords. Okay, let's go ahead and fix that. Like, how fast could you move? How fast could you find problems and then solve those problems? How fast could you analyze the data and then be able to use that information, those insights, to make better decisions, whether that's buying, selling, doesn't matter. That gets really interesting. And if you think about why you hire people for intelligence, right? We're not hiring, what do they use? Donkeys for manual labor here in agriculture, right? Like, when you hire a person, you're hiring them for their brain solely. That's intelligence. Well, most Amazon sellers that I kind of polled in the audience, I said, how many of you have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people working with you? Most of them, it was just them, right? So there's this other gap where you have sellers, again, drowning in data and all these different things, and they can't hire intelligence fast enough, or are unwilling to. Understandably, you got to onboard, manage, all that stuff. I get it. But what if you solve that gap too, right? What if you could still add 10 PhD levels of intelligence to your business for $1,000 a month? That's pretty interesting. So I think you'll have more intelligent-based automation. If you're familiar with Zapier or Make.com, take that, but add intelligence inside of it with reasoning. A lot of things change. And I think you'll have more augmentation. I use that word very intentionally. I don't think we will get to a world where AI is just managing everything for us in some kind of utopian, Star Trek world, although that sounds dope to me as a Trekkie. But I think what really happens is what's happening now. Like, AI is just there with you, these co-pilots, this augmentation to help you kind of do better. I mean, we have co-pilots in Intercom now in the support tool that we use. I don't think we use it that often because we have it pretty well refined, but we were talking about this the other day too. Like, what if we hired another CSM and we needed to onboard them? Well, there's a thing that's connected to all of our documentation where they can just ask the question, hey, how do I do X? Or, hey, what's the answer to Y? There you go. Easy. So it's just speeding things up. So that's like a really quick rundown, obviously, of what I talked about. But again, I wanted sellers in the audience at AMZ United to shift their perspective of how they're making decisions and thinking about things. I think you need to start focusing on getting access to more of your data, understanding how to utilize that information to make better decisions. And also thinking about, like, how does your company look in the next 12-ish months as this technology continues to evolve? And it is evolving rapidly, which is incredible. So it gets me kind of hyped up, but I know it's super nerdy, but that's essentially what I talked about at AMZ United.
Yeah. And I mean, we talk about constantly on office hours the ability to kind of gain access to more data and make intelligent decisions off of it. So as more data becomes readily available and tools are coming into the market that lets you assess that data more quickly, it's only going to free up more time for you to do the things that make the biggest impact for your business, which right now is, I would say, like 85% of it's probably going to be sourcing. Maybe the other 15% is coordinating with distributors or whatever that shipping or warehouse stuff, whatever that may look like for individual sellers on the platform. But even that seems like it may be automated sometime in the future if we get some sort of AI sourcers that become available. So everything just continues to kind of pick up in velocity, and it's just now getting to the point where I think platforms and tools and things are beginning to catch up to the actual velocity that you can operate effectively at.
Yeah. It's going to unlock a lot. So AI sourcers, I think, is the coolest thing I've ever thought of. I think it's going to be sick if we can pull it off. I think the components already exist. It's just putting them together in a way that makes sense. And I'm not a software engineer, so I can't build it myself, unfortunately. But really cool stuff. See, Michael, shouldn't the optimized price be the price that sells the item versus the buy box price that you may hold, but no one buys at? Or am I missing something? Yes, no, this is a great question. I'm glad you brought this up. The optimal price is still a price at which you get sales. If you think about it, you have sales velocity and profit margin, right? The optimal price is trying to find that balance as it's shifting, because it could go up, right? The optimal price for a toy in Q4 is very different than that same toy in Q1. What a lot of people do is they overemphasize velocity, aka increasing their buy box ownership percentage, and then they up here, and then they actually decrease their profit margin. So what we do with Maven is we're actually rebalancing that, bringing you back into balance. So you're still getting sales. So yes, you're going to have a pullback on velocity, but you're going to have an increase in profit margin. Again, that balance. So it's less about just having a high price. And I'm so glad you brought this up, because a lot of people go, well, my price is higher. I'm like, again, is that good? Right? Like, if your price is high, but you're getting 0 sales, kind of what's the point, right? That just sounds nice. So yes, you are true. So the way we calculate that optimal price is still getting sales. Absolutely. Because otherwise it's unrealized and who cares? Let's see. The mobile device search feature only accepts a single character at a time or via copy and paste, which significantly increases the time required for troubleshooting on the go. Can you do this? Because I haven't seen this myself. Can you, if you can, record your screen on your mobile device while you're doing that, so we can have an actual, like, we can see exactly what's happening, and then let us know what operating system you're on, Android, iOS, all that good stuff, and then we'll take a look and see what's going on there. That should be a pretty easy fix. I don't see that as often though. But yeah, it's funny, even this morning in stand up, Finn was like, dude, that response was like to an email, was like really fast and like really well done. I was like, yeah, that was AI. I wrote 2 bullet points and then it expanded it into an email that is exactly the way I write, and like fired it off because it was perfect. So these things are here already, which is great. Let's see, George, is there a way to group variations from a specific ASIN on a drop down so they're grouped together instead of having multiple single line items? For example, I sell shirts and have sizes and colors and variations. So you can do this actually on the listing specific page. So if you go to one of those SKUs, there is a drop down where you can actually toggle between each one. You cannot do this in a group on the listings page, so you won't be able to do that. Although you could do basically a keyword filter. So you could just, in that small search, you can actually just do a search for the exact title, and then you would only see that, right? So as long as it includes that full title and you're not including the variation specifics in that search query, you will actually only see those, which is kind of nice. So you can somewhat group in that way. Casey, correct me if I'm wrong, or you have a better way.
No, that's correct. That's what I would recommend as well. That's probably the best way to do it. Kind of search by that title or ASIN or whatever it is, if it has common terms, things like that. If you sell like a group of toys, for example, putting in like the name of the toy, but not all the specific variations, that should populate all of those listings within that group for you.
Yeah. Great question though. And again, open office hours. Yeah, I just kind of kicked us off with some nerdiness because AMZ United was awesome. If you did go, let me know in the comments, because we probably said hello. We gave away so many shirts. I think like 200 something shirts. So that was fun. It was one of those things where, and we've said this publicly, like, more people are just transparent, just sharing everything, and to see it in person and experience it is probably one of the most amazing things ever, because it makes it tangible, right? It's one thing to have somebody say that online. It's another thing to see it in person and experience it yourself. But there was a lot of new sellers too, which was awesome. They're like, hey, I'm 3 months into selling. I'm like, awesome. The go-to is like, what do you recommend I do as a new seller? And I'm like, just talk to everyone. I was like, everybody who's here, all the big name people that you look up to want to talk to you. And they're not going to hide anything from you. Like, and I'm actually, one guy was like, oh, I really want to get into creating content and making a name for myself. And one of our partners, David Kim, was like probably 10 feet away. I was like, go talk to him right now. Like, go talk to him. He's kind of newer into doing that and scaling it up. Just go ask him, and he, sure enough, went over, started to talk, and had a great conversation. So see, Diego, I was there at AMZ United. I'm that guy from East Boston. Love it. Yeah, it was a pleasure meeting you, Diego. That was awesome. It's nice when you meet people and they're like, oh yeah, Boston. I'm like, yes. Awesome. Super cool. But yeah, so, a lot of good presentations too. A lot of big names. Amazon Lit was there. Michael McConnell, who like kind of heads a lot of it, did a presentation on Keepa and a lot of big data stuff, and it was packed. It made me happy to see so many people wanting to learn about how to take advantage of their data. That was incredible. So just really fun. Got to see and meet a lot of new people. A lot of users that have been with us for like 5 years, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm this person now." Like I know their name from support. I'm like, "Oh my gosh!" Like I've never seen your face or met you in person, obviously. So that's always kind of fun. And we just get to geek out the whole time. Like that's all we do. We just sit there, have great conversations, meet other people. But it was packed. It was very packed. Long days, which was good. Only one day though. I kind of like that to a degree, but I like it when it's 2 days because it gives you more time to like take your pace as a attendee. With one day, you're like, all right, I have to decide, am I going to watch this person speak or this other person speak at the same time? And then when do I get to, go talk with vendors and all that stuff? It can feel like a lot. But I will say AMZ United did a phenomenal job setting this up. I mean, it was massive, huge room too, like audio equipment. Like I was a little intimidated because, I've spoken in person before, but this was like a legit stage, massive screen behind me. I posted it on my Twitter profile. But it was just daunting, but it was cool once I got up there. But it was crazy. So definitely fun.
Yeah. I've been to a handful of conferences for different industries. I think the sweet spot is like 2 days with a welcome thing, like making it like 3 nights and 2 days. Technically 1 day just kind of feels like you stretch yourself too thin. 3 days you're burned out by the end. So if you kind of have like a little intro with people, kind of get some FaceTime that first night, and then kind of more speakers, content, things over the next couple of days, I think that tends to be a good balance. But but sometimes cramming it all into 1 day makes it like more exciting. You kind of just run on that adrenaline fuel as opposed to actual fuel. But yeah, it sounds like it was a good time speaking with a lot of folks there.
Yeah, the one in Orlando, I think was 3 days. And that was a lot. It was great because we're going ham, right? But at the end of the third day, because I wouldn't eat till like 5 p.m. Like I would just go ham, right? Just knocking it out. I remember just laying in a booth at a restaurant and just lay there catonic, just like I am done. Nobody talked to me for 2 days. But it was they're awesome. I think when I was a seller, there wasn't a lot of easily accessible conferences. And I was in school full time and all these different things. Right. But I think I really missed out on doing those things. I think it's something that a lot of people say you should go to, and it just sounds like, well, that's just another thing I have to spend money on and, time. But the relationships you build with people at these things is absolutely astounding. I mean, I'm meeting people in the credit card hacking space. I haven't done travel hacking in a hot minute, but people that are like, oh yeah, I have a friend who made $3 million doing manufacturer spend. I'm like, oh, how? Tells me everything. That's not public knowledge. You're right. But like also with sellers, right? Like, how are you doing X? How are you solving this problem? How are you working on that? What about this? They'll tell you everything. Nobody is hiding anything, which is so cool. And most of the time you're like, hey man, let me get your email. Let's go back and forth. Let's hold each other accountable, right? You find people that are at your level that are just as ambitious as you, to where you could kind of combine forces and move faster. There's also people above you that are willing to share everything. And yeah, they may have courses you have to pay for, but a lot of times in person, dude, they're just answering everything. Nobody's like, oh, we'll buy my course, right? Like everybody's just like, yeah, what question do you have? I'll answer it directly right now. And so it's a fun time. And honestly, like any chance you can be around other people doing the exact same thing you're doing, who get the language you're using, who understands the difficulties. I think it's just a good thing, right? Because you feel understood, you feel heard. It's just nice, it's there's something about community, right? Our industry is very community driven, at least online, but you take that offline and some amazing things happen. So there's a lot of big deals being cut. That's for sure.
Yeah, and I think we always talk about that shift from when you were initially a seller and everybody was kind of keeping their cards a little bit closer to their chest, and now it is a much more collaborative space. So if you are a new Aura user or just a new Amazon seller, I definitely recommend checking out Chris Grant online, checking out David Kim online as well. They both have great content, whether it's Aura specific or just seller specific, and then joining as many online communities or forums or just thinking of a third word for online community, but it just left my brain. Anyway,
Discord.
just join those. Discord. Exactly. Yeah. So just join those groups, because even if you don't participate in the chatter, just observing that chatter is going to help inform your decisions or things to avoid, things to look out for, and just help you get up to speed a little bit more quickly.
Yeah. 1,000%. It is interesting, the Discord stuff, right? Because there's so many free communities now. There's definitely a lot of paid ones too. And from the sellers I've talked to, the paid ones are fantastic. But as is true with any kind of networking or community, you have to be able to actually jump in, contribute, ask questions, all those things. And I think that's like a big piece of advice I'd give to all the new sellers is jump in and actually ask questions. And if somebody's mean to you, because somebody always will be, take it as a grain of salt, take it to the chin and just move on. There's always at least one person who's willing to help jump in with anything. And it's great. See, George has a question here. Just not wanting to show. Casey, are you able to pull up George's? It's not working for me. There you go. Okay, cool. It does not let me click the button. That's so weird. So George, how aggressive is the repricer trying to get the buy box? I've been the lowest price on a listing, but the buy box price still giving to someone that's higher. Okay, so this issue is less about being aggressive. In one of, it's either not or it is. I'm going to backtrack here for a second. It could not be because Amazon could be that seller. So this is where it gets kind of tough in these conversations because I need more data. Assuming Amazon is that buy box holder, I can't speak today. You may never get the buy box until they decide to play nice. That's very much possible. On the flip side, it is how aggressive you need to be. So this kind of comes down to your strategy a bit. So what I would say is, let's say for a moment you're repricing below by 1 penny against this specific competitor, and you're not pulling the buy box. Go to 2 pennies. Did that work? No. Go to 4 pennies. Did that work? No. Go to 8 pennies. Double it until you start to get it, and then you know what works on that listing against that one specific competitor. It changes all over the place. This is why Maven will do this for you. This is so important because you can spend hours upon hours running these experiments to figure out what works. And by the way, what works now will change at some point. So Maven does all that for you, which is so important. So sometimes it's not about being more aggressive. Sometimes it just is what it is. Other times it's definitely like how aggressive you need to be. So it's less about like how aggressive is Aura and more just how aggressive do you need to be on this particular competitor and listing pair. In that case, again, if you're using Maven, it's going to do that for you. If you're using rule-based, you're going to have to do that yourself and kind of figure out what works and then update a strategy. What I would do is I would duplicate your strategy, start to tweak that reprice under value until it makes sense, and then leave it there for that one listing. Casey, anything you want to add on to that?
Yeah, George, winning the buy box is always complicated. We know that Amazon's algorithm for determining the buy box winner is a combination of shipping time, price, and seller rating. With that being said, that specific algorithm isn't public, so we're not sure which levers to pull at certain times. Typically, the only one that you can really control is going to be that price. So like Dylan said, repricing slightly more aggressively to see if you can take that buy box. But there are situations where Amazon will prioritize themselves, even though they may not have the most advantageous offer. Unfortunately, when you play in their sandbox, you got to play by their rules in that case. So yeah, I would tend to agree with Dylan, perhaps increasing from 2 cents, 4 cents, maybe work your way up to 10 or 15 cents just to see where that may kind of rotate the buy box out of that competitive seller. And Aura won't continue to price downwards if you price, let's say, 10 cents below the buy box winner. If you don't win the buy box there, it won't continue to reprice downwards. That's by design so that you don't tank the pricing on a listing, really slicing your margins pretty heavily there. So that's going to be why you want to kind of incrementally increase that figure that you're repricing below there. And then just to clarify, Maven itself won't specifically target the buy box. Maven's going to target that optimal price, which we discussed earlier, tends to be slightly higher than the buy box, but has the best combo of velocity and margin there. If you are trying to win the buy box, you'll definitely want to use that buy box targeting strategy and adjust that margin that you're pricing below, like we mentioned.
Yeah. I see John here. Hey guys, trying to figure out what inventory is missing by cost in the overview graph, but cannot find it. Not a big deal, but I would like it gone. LOL. Yeah, totally get it. If you're getting a notification in the top right, so you're probably going to get a red or a yellow dot. Click on that. You'll see the section that says missing cost. Click on that card, and then it will show you all those. If you have all your costs added, but it's still showing on the graph, what it's saying is basically historical data does not include it at time of sale for whatever SKUs. You can't really fix that. We're just letting, there's nothing to fix. We're just letting you know, hey, by the way, like we're retroactively adding it for you, but the cost could have been different because there was not one in our system at the time of that specific order that we're showing. We're just letting you know that could be different is what we're saying. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, essentially there, John, if you had a sale go through that didn't have a cost entered in or at the time, we're just letting you know, hey, this might be inaccurate. That missing cost notification will stay there even if you have updated all of your costs until that specific sale is outside of the displayed time window. I assume you're probably looking at a 30-day snapshot. If you bring that down to perhaps the last week, that may disappear for you. But whenever that specific sale is outside of that view, that notification will disappear for you. So if you do have all your costs entered, you should be all set moving forward. We're just not able to backtrack and attribute it to historical sales there.
Yeah. See, awesome. Glad to hear this is helpful. We love doing these things. Let's see. See, Joel, I don't see your question above. Can you go ahead and re-add that question for us? We'll make sure you get answered.
And Eben, just in regards to the reporting issue, we are still working on deploying a solution for that. In the meantime, the only thing that is being impacted is the actual reporting of data. That does include the reporting of price updates and pricing activity. With that being said, repricing is still fully active in all of accounts. There's been no interruptions in the actual repricing of your listings. So no need to worry there. It is just a reporting issue. We should have some sort of solution deployed. I would say perhaps by midday tomorrow, a little bit of a more in-depth fix. So we're trying to make sure we don't further make things worse. That's always what you want to do. Obviously, when you're making a patch, you don't want to create more problems. So we're just trying to create an all-encompassing fix for everybody who's being impacted and then deploying that as well. So no need to worry, just a reporting issue. Everything is still up and running outside of that.
Yeah, and we're making a lot of changes on the back end for how data is stored so that it's dramatically faster on the load too. I think it was last week or the week before, we made a bunch of changes on our queries to make things load faster. So hopefully you noticed that. We're trying to take that at a deeper level and make that even more. So we're moving some data around. So you're going to see a few of those things, but again, data's still there, not a problem. But yeah, repricing still active, not a big deal. And once we get this rolled back out, then you'll be able to see all that data come back through. So you're not going to have any loss of data or anything like that. And Joel, if you could go ahead and repost your question into the chat here. I don't see it above, so either it didn't come through or what, but we'll get you sorted out. Yeah, we're making a lot of big changes, which is fun. A lot of like big performance changes, just to make things dramatically faster across the board, and that's what's gonna be fun. See, John, how do I get a shirt with the Aura logo like the one you're wearing? Haha. Oh, you want the special Casey one? Okay. Well, yeah, there. John, do this. We really only send out these. But if you want one, send me an email, dylan@goaura.com with I need your address, your shirt size, and your phone number. They do ask for that for shipping purposes. If you send me those 3 things, I'll make sure to add you to our list and get you some shirts shipped out. I've got a growing list of people I'm sending shirts to.
Yeah, I saw James in the office with a white one the other day. He had a white one with black Aura logo. So I was curious where he dug that one up from or how long ago that one was from.
Wait, a white one with a black logo?
I think it was like this shirt, just inverse.
I don't think I've ever ordered that. I don't know.
Yeah, he might have just ordered it on his own. Maybe I'm just misremembering. Maybe I didn't have enough coffee that morning or whatever it may be.
That's funny. I'd be curious, actually. That's funny. Let's see, Gina, how is the best way to deal with high pricing errors that make my item go stranded? Casey, I know you have some good insights on this.
Yeah, Gina. So deactivations and high pricing errors, that's more often than not caused by having min and max prices set in Seller Central. Though we do obviously issue those price updates to Seller Central, Aura is blind to any min and max prices set in other platforms, including Seller Central. So most likely what occurred here is your min and max range in Aura is wider than what is set in Seller Central. What we typically recommend there is actually removing those prices or yes, min and max prices from Seller Central. Those really are just safeguards to make sure that you don't sell too high or too low. If you want to make sure that you don't ever sell too low, you'll just want to make sure that min price is lower than the min price set in Aura. Max price, really completely optional. So I would definitely recommend removing those. But once you've taken care of that, you can reactivate those listings, and then repricing should resume based on the assigned strategy settings there. But that'll be most likely the cause. And sometimes min and max prices aren't visible in default views within Seller Central. So you can check your preferences there, make sure it is a displayed column, and make those adjustments.
Nice. See, Joel has a great question here. I have Maven strategies for 5% increments from 0 to 100 in ROI to avoid driving the price down too low. Is this necessary? Should I be concerned setting my ROI with Maven to 20% when a listing consistently sells around 40% ROI? So no, actually is the answer. So Maven is not going to drive the price down unless that's just kind of, I mean, there are cases where it's going to make sense to do that, but it's rarely the case. So Maven's designed to not need that many strategies or variations of it. We've actually tested having a single Maven strategy with a 0% ROI to see what would happen to margin and things of that nature. It turns out it does not harm it at all. So what I would recommend is have one, maybe two of those. I would have one at 0% ROI because you're going to need one of those as well. Things happen. And then have that 20% and you're going to be fine. So on that example you gave us where, you're setting your minimum ROI to 20%, but you're consistently getting sales around 40%. Is that going to create a problem? No, not really. So I would say simplicity is best when you're using Maven. The moment you have far too many variations of it, it just becomes more of a management problem for you where you're having to go in and be like, well, what, do I go from 20% to 10%, 15% to 30%? I don't want you to make those decisions. Maven's doing that stuff for you anyways. So the more breadth you give Maven, the better the performance is going to be. This sounds very counterintuitive. We've tested it where we had a user who migrated everything from rule base at 30% minimum ROI to Maven, same 30% ROI, saw worse results. So we said, okay, let's dive in and see what's happening here. We actually lowered the 30% ROI to 15% ROI and performance kicked back off. Now that does not mean that the margin went down, funny enough, right? So it's a different way of doing repricing. And so the best way to think about this is the more range, and by range, I mean mins and maxes, that Maven has, the better it can perform and do what it needs to do. Now, if your minimum was at 30% and the buy box is consistently at 28% and you lower your min to 15, you're going to be selling around 28. You'll probably still get a few sales above that as we're raising the buy box, but that's where the market's at, right? So a few things to keep in mind there. There are some caveats, but for the most part, you're going to be fine there. I love this question because it really it gets to the heart of what we're building with Maven. And it's designed to be less work for the end user and less strategy management. I think that's a big problem we've seen over the years is as we migrated people from legacy to 1.0, we were manually doing this at the forefront. People had 20 something strategies and I'm like, that's too much. Right. And it's less about does it work or not work? It's really just the whole idea of technology is that it abstracts away the complexity from you. You shouldn't have to be doing listing management like this. Ideally, what happens is you have a far more complicated thing like an AI model that can do all that stuff for you. So you don't need 5 strategies. You need one and it can outperform the other 5. That's kind of where we're, working towards. And I think we made pretty good strides, which is great. But yeah, you definitely don't need, I would not do every 5% increments. You're just creating huge workloads for yourself, which I don't want you to do. I like when we had a partner join us and he was talking to us about jumping in and testing Aura. He's like, listen, I'm the laziest repricing seller you'll ever meet. I was like, then you're gonna love us. You won't do a crap ton of work. It's not a huge load of management and all these different things, and you're going to get great performance. Sure enough, we ended up doubling his sales the next day, which is kind of fun. And he's like, yeah, I kind of did nothing. I was like, awesome. That's the point. So, but great question. Really appreciate that. Casey, is there anything you want to add on to that though?
Yeah, I mean, I think with Maven, like we always, or we were talking about earlier and on other office hours, like analyzing data. Maven, in addition to being a repricing strategy, it really is a data analyst. So by having a min and max range as wide as possible, you're providing it with more data to analyze and therefore make the most intelligent decision possible. What is nice with Maven, since it does kind of look for that optimal price, the only scenario where it is going to begin to reprice down towards your minimum will be as if the buy box is suppressed. That is a setting that you can uncheck in the advanced section of Maven, where you can uncheck that box. But if a buy box is suppressed, it'll slowly reprice downwards to try and reactivate it for you. Other than that, it really isn't going to ever price down to your min. So by having different Maven strategies with different ROI percentages really is a little just redundant and does create more work for you, just because the actual logic and rules of Maven don't change with that ROI. Whereas it may be a little bit more not advantageous, but it may make more sense to have different rules-based strategies with different specific settings. But some of the most successful Aura users I've seen have one Maven strategy, one buy box strategy, and then a liquidation strategy. And then outside of that, they may have one or two more strategies for very specific listings or groups of listings. But outside of that, it is, I do like to kind of encourage a less is more approach with those strategies. It just makes it easier for you to manage ongoingly as, landscapes of listings change and prices and time of year and all that stuff.
Yeah. See, Wayne, definitely don't freak out. Wayne was freaking out when that question got answered, thinking he was doing something wrong. You're not. This is definitely like you're on the right track here. You're definitely safe. This is how it's designed, right? I think it's important whenever you're looking at like, how do I do certain things in any kind of tool? You should ask, how is it designed to perform best, and then work in those constraints. That's just going to make it dramatically easier for you. See, Brad, what fees are included for the profit calculation? When I am setting the profit floor, I usually set my profit floor at $3 and I set my ROI at 0%. I want to make sure that I will never lose money when setting the profit floor after all fees are taken into account. Yes, so we're taking in all fees, but the FBA inbound fees, we don't take into consideration those. That may change. We intentionally did not do that because more so in an ideal world, we're not showing you your net profit. We're showing you your gross profit after fees and all that stuff. And then your FBA inbound fees, you can take out from your gross profit as a whole on like a cash basis and to get your real like net profit, right? So we do that very intentionally. That could change certainly. But yeah, we're factoring in all selling fees, FBA fees, merchant, if there is any merchant fees. But yeah, we're factoring in all that stuff for you. So basically if you do a 0% ROI, you are breaking even. You're not losing any money outside of the FBA inbound fees. That's something you should consider. That's just a good way to think about it.
Yeah, and Brad, if you are an FBM seller, you'll want to include those shipping fees in your costs. Like Dylan said, any referral or fulfillment fees, those are automatically going to be taken care of. Any shipping, prep, or storage fees of any capacity, you'll want to add those to the cost so that those are factored correctly.
Yeah. See, Eben, okay, so trial just ended, automatically moved you to the essential plan, and you need to be on early stage. Reach out to support. In the bottom right, you'll see a blue icon. Click that. That's our chat. If you're not seeing that in Chrome or whatever, sometimes Chrome extensions will block that. You can email us at, Casey, correct me if I'm wrong, is it support@goaura.com?
It is hello@goaura.com. And Eben, Finn should be covering the inbox now. He may be on an onboarding call, in which case I will be back in the inbox in about 10 minutes and I'll be able to help you out there.
Yeah. So hello@goaura.com. If you can't find that live chat, we'll get you sorted out. Early stage, you do have to apply for it. We don't just automatically do it yet. We do ask people to apply. It takes like 2 minutes tops, but we'll get you sorted out for sure. Let's see. John probably has been asked way too many times, but when are you planning to release the huge update? Planning's hard in software. We are targeting late October, early November, but it's software. So that, plus or minus a month, we'll see. We'll definitely keep everybody, especially if you're in the user testing beta group, which there's a handful of people that are, you will be the first to be made aware of it for testing purposes. We definitely want to get you in there testing some stuff before we go public, but that's about the time frame. We're also, as we're doing this, rethinking Aura on the repricing side as well, and making sure design is updated, modern, all that good stuff, making a few tweaks on the back end. So Everything we do is very data intensive, so we want to make sure that the infrastructure is there. We're learning a ton as we're going to, so we're making some changes even on the repricing side that will definitely help. Diego, the testing is closed. What we will most likely do is we will go that beta testing group first. Once we feel confident, we will then roll it out to Aura users first, and then we will go public. So if you're an Aura user, you'll be basically in batch 2 to be able to get access. So you won't fall too far behind, basically, is what will happen. So that's good. Let's see, Brad, what should be the ROI set on an average to cover the inbound fees? I know it's different for every account, but what is the average? It's really hard to do that based on a lot of factors. So I can't give an average that I think works really well across the board. I mean, the best thing to do for you is I would look at all your inbound inventory costs for your FBA shipments, divide it by the total number, and then get that dollar amount, that average, and just keep in mind it's going to, not be perfect, but let's call it $2. Then what you do is you can just say, I want a profit floor of $2, and you're set. Or if you wanted to do the ROI route, I would basically switch ROI to fixed profit, change that to $2, and then that will be factored in to your minimum as well. Again, it's not perfect just because there's so much variance that can come into shipping and costs and things of that nature. But that's one way you could factor it in pretty well. It gets you more of the way there. See, Eben, yeah, I think Chrome may be hiding that chat icon. Yeah. There's a few. I forget exactly which ones they are, but there are a few Chrome extensions like ad blockers that can actually block the chat feature, which is like super annoying. We can't fix that, unfortunately. So if you go in and just disable a few of those, or just use Safari or different browser to log in, you should see that and not have that issue. I will say if you're using Aura on your mobile device, whether that's Android or iOS, that should not have any blockers, and chat still works there. So you should be able to get that sorted out. See, Gina, Finn and I were talking about creating a strategy for A-to-A flips that haven't rebounded to the original price. Can you offer some advice? It's funny. I was talking with Saul in AMZ United, or at AMZ United, and we're talking about trying to build like an A-to-A specific strategy. And I got to sit down with him and kind of pick his brain a little bit more. Without diving too deep, I think my biggest piece of advice is use your min price to basically create that blockade. So if let's say you bought it at 25 and you expect it to rise back up to 50, I would just set your min to like 48, maybe 45. And then that way you're intentionally high up and you're just waiting for the buy box to pop back up, and then you're good to go. That's probably going to be the best route. Without me, again, I haven't spent a ton of time on the A-to-A stuff quite yet. I generally understand it. But I do want to think a little bit more deeper and talk more with Saul on like what's his exact strategy here before I make like a really definitive, like, here's what I advise people to do. But I think just generally speaking, the easiest lever is to use that minimum value set higher so that you're waiting for that to pop back up. That should fix the problem, or not problem, but you know what I mean. Let's see, Diego, are we able to upload pricing rules and mins before it shows up in Seller Central? Reason I asked is because I bulk upload my listings and was wondering if I'd be able to create a loader for Aura so that I can upload the future pricing rules at the same time. Yes. Only caveat here, the listings must be live in Aura for that to go through. So you cannot create a listing in Aura, right? We're only reading what is coming from Seller Central. So if it's at least there, yes, all day long. What I tend to recommend people though is use one of our integrations, ScanPower, Restock Pro, what have you. That way you can automate that entire thing. But yeah, you could definitely do that. We have an uploads page. You can basically download a pre-fill template or just the format columns that's empty. And then you can say, cool, like here's the strategy ID I want to use for this one, for that one. Here's my mins, my costs, all that good stuff. You could definitely do that. What is good though is we won't reprice anything unless you've told us to. We have a strategy and we have a cost, or at least a min value. So you could just wait until they start to pop in. From what I've been seeing lately, whenever you create the shipment, it tends to come in pretty fast. So what I would probably have you look at is after you create the shipment, wait a day just in case, just to give yourself some buffer or give Amazon some buffer. then check and kind of figure out what is that average, load time for you. And then I would just have that ready to go. If you go to help.goer.com and search uploads, you'll actually see, we walk you through exactly how to use that spreadsheet, all that good stuff. Super easy. If you have any problems, you reach out to support. We're happy to help you format and all that good stuff too. Don't feel like you have to do it yourself. We could definitely help. Oh yeah, yes. Yeah. So basically, no. So we can't record SKUs that are not in Seller Central. It's kind of intentional. We don't want to create things and then have to link them. That creates actually a lot of complexity. But again, they tend to load in pretty fast after you create the FBA shipment once it's marked as like created. So that should solve that problem. Let's see. Ever thought about an on-page Amazon plugin extension to set cost mins maxes? I have thought about it. I don't love it, because most of the time you're setting things prior to you buying it, is what a lot of people do with the plugins. So they tend to say, okay, well, here's what I want it to be, but things change rapidly. I don't think setting mins and maxes manually make sense anymore, period. So I wouldn't want to do that. Cost is a completely different thing. But again, that makes the assumption that you're able to create listings before they're actually created via a shipment. So we're kind of holding off on that for right now. That, again, everything's subject to change, but as it currently stands, I think we're going to hold off on doing something like that for a period of time. Awesome. So I know we're a minute over here, so we're going to go ahead and wrap up. Appreciate everybody coming on today. Really throwing down some awesome questions and comments here. We do this every Wednesday. Most Wednesdays, we didn't do it last week, obviously, because AMZ United, but every Wednesday from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. EST, it's just open office hours. Basically, whatever you want to talk about, we're here to talk about, geek out with, and help out with. So would love for you to share this with everybody, so other people can join as well every week. And if you have any questions after the fact, please don't hesitate to reach out to support. We're always here, down to help with kind of whatever you have. But with that, we will let you get back to the rest of your week. Casey, see you next time.
Yeah, have a good week.